This is our very first meetup of the year. So a happy new year to you all. It's great to have you with us. My name is Christine Ranzi. I'm from the School of Education at the University of Leeds, but also the Creative HE community, which we set up in 2015 and have now generate a collaboration with a new Imaginative Curriculum Research and Scholarship Center. We have some colleagues who are here with us today from Creative HE. For example, Anna, if you want to introduce yourself briefly. Thank you.
Hello, thanks, Chrissy. So I'm Anna, as Chrissy said. I've been with Creative HE for about 6 or 7 years now, and I'm an academic developer, and my role is specifically inclusive practice lead for the University of Law. So I'm a home worker because we've got a massively distributed campus network all over the England in particular. So I'm based in Lancashire, kind of right in the middle of it all, and I work remotely across all those sites, leading on inclusive learning and teaching practices.
That's great. Thank you so much, Anna. And we have Charlotte here with us today, also from Creative HE.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Charlotte Stevens. I work as an academic developer at the University of Warwick. I think I've been involved in Creative HE since around the time of the pandemic when it all went online. And I very much enjoy this space, and I've got an awful lot out of it and met some great people. So I hope you do too.
Thank you, Charlotte. And we have actually Tellis with us from the School of Education and the steering group of the Imaginative Curriculum Research and Scholarship Center. Tellis.
Hi everybody. So yeah, sorry, I just put a little hello in the chat here. So yes, I'm a lecturer in the School of Education. I'm a lecturer in inclusion, childhood and youth. I also share an office with Chrissy, and as Chrissy just said, I've also got involved with the ICRSC as well. And yeah, this is my first Creative HE meetup actually, so I'm really looking forward to being here.
Great, thank you so much. And we have further colleagues and PGRs with us from Leeds, but also other parts of the world. I see we have somebody from Indonesia, isn't it? Who is here from Indonesia? Where is that message? I can't see it now. Anfal?
Yeah.
Well, it's not me. I am from Leeds, but
yes,
I think it's Chandra.
Chandra, yes, Chandra. Are you in Indonesia at the moment?
Yeah. I'm in Indonesia.
Great. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that will be useful for you and everybody else who is here with us today. So we have already said that we have joined forces, Creative HE and the Imaginative Curriculum Research and Scholarship Center. The acronym is not the easiest one to pronounce, as evidenced by Dallas, so we will be working on this. But we have started organizing these joined up meetups since October. And we hope that they will be growing in the future as well. So this is a space for experimentation. This is a space for sharing practices, sharing ideas around curriculum design, creativity and imagination, obviously at the heart of this all. But our idea is to connect educators and students from across the sector, not just higher education, but also the education sector more widely, and engage in research and scholarship. As you see here, in the past we created a number of open educational resources and other academic outputs, and we hope to continue that in the future. At the moment there is the Imagine book which we can share, and you are all welcome to contribute. This is an open press book, and I think we have Kirsten here from our library at Leeds as well, who's leading that initiative. So just very briefly before we start and I hand over to Nathan, our very next meetup is on the 18th of February, and we have a colleague from Hull. That's Dr. Wasim Ahmed, who is going to share with us imaginative curriculum design for marketing and computing, and that will be very exciting to hear also. But for now, Today we have my wonderful colleague Nathan Loynes with us. He's from our Lifelong Learning Center, and he is leading there a number of programs, and he will tell us about this. And I was wondering, actually, looking at your CV, if there's anything in the Lifelong Learning Center you are not leading. So this is very exciting. But with Nathan, we worked very closely together for around 2 years on the Discovery project that I was leading at the University of Leeds. And I know, I have seen it firsthand, he is a very committed, very passionate colleague, academic, experimenter also, I would say. It's social justice very much at the heart of it, sharing, connecting and experimenting and creating rich and diverse learning experiences for his students. So I'm delighted that we have Nathan with us today to share with us something he's developing at the moment, because this space, like we said at the beginning, is creating that opportunity for sharing half-baked ideas, sharing things that are under development, so that we can engage critically and creatively in the design process, potentially influence and shape something that will be useful for not just Nathan's students and those he works with, but potentially also others, also in other areas. Nathan, over to you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Chrissy, and thanks for everybody being in the audience. That what I'm about to unleash on you, I suppose. Again, it's very much a work in progress. It is sort of thinking aloud, but getting something on the table. I think a lot of the time as academics, me certainly, if I'm speaking about myself, I live a lot of the time in my head, and often my ideas don't get off the drawing board. In fact, it'd be good to get them on the drawing board in the first place. That'd be a start. So faced with a particular challenge one afternoon, which was on our programme, we work with mature learners, non-traditional learners who maybe want to come to Leeds and are not quite sure if university is for them. They are often working with children and families within schools, in support roles or out in community settings. So my colleague said, we need to do a taster session activity to give them a flavour of the kind of concepts that we explore at university in the first year, but we need to sort of do it in an inclusive and non-threatening way, and in a way that confirms that they do understand these ideas, but maybe they don't have the academic labels for them. So that's where this originated from. From conception to execution of what you're going to see today, it took me about 2 hours to do. Why I'm telling you that is that I want to inspire you by the end of this presentation to think, well, if I engage with what you will see as AI and working in tandem with AI to generate ideas and collaborate on projects, maybe some of my ideas, or rather some of your ideas, can be realized much more quickly, and they can go from the sort of drawing board into the space really to start making a difference. I'll just briefly say a little bit about where I'm coming from. My first degree is in sociology, which I obtained in 1997. So I've been very interested in equality and how certain parts of the population are generally excluded in society. And that includes, of course, how they're excluded within education. Upon leaving university, I got a job as a social worker, and I started working with quite damaged young people in the care system. I'll come back to that in a second. I then qualified as a social worker in the year 2000, and I spent about 10 years doing social work with, quite marginalised and at-risk communities. I obtained a PGCE in 2010, and I have been in full-time higher education for the past 17 years. For the past 12 years, I think I've been at the Lifelong Learning Centre working with non-traditional students in the manner that I said. What inspires me to think about the profundity of life chances is I was key working a young lady, we'll call her Louise, and there was an incident on the unit. Louise had self-harmed, and I needed to prepare a report for Louise as social worker, to which my manager put all Louisa's case files on my desk, which was a big stack of them about like this, and it was in the bad old days of having to work with paper rather than digital. And I thumbed through all these case files, and I started in chronological order. And the chronology started before Louise was born, where Louisa's mum was having social work input. And so we could read through these case files up until the point that Louise was brought into care, lower level need of care, gradually escalating because of Louisa's needs, on and on and on and on, until she ended up in our situation, self-harming. And it provided a real picture of answering the question, how do young people end up in the care system? And they don't end up there kind of by accident. A series of events seems to have conspired against them throughout their life on the planet. And and when you read it backwards, it's kind of obvious. It's a bit like reading your CV, I suppose, that, you know, if you look back at your CV, the first jobs that you had and how you progressed through that chronology, it kind of makes sense. So I've always been interested in life chances because of that. And there's a module that we teach on the Child and Family Studies program called Changing Children's Life Chances, where students have to identify the geographic areas around Leeds and say what's missing from the offer that's available to children. Some of this stuff, like my story about poor Louise, can be quite dispiriting. We know that if we've worked directly with children in school and in other settings, that often it's like pushing water uphill. It can be quite difficult. And I think it's important, despite what I'm going to say about the difficulties of working with inequality, social exclusion, and differences in life chances, to have what I'm going to call a pedagogy of hope, or rather what Paulo Freire would call a pedagogy of hope, that we have to believe ultimately as practitioners that we can make a difference. And I'm going to come back to this analogy, that we can start tweaking the sails. We can tweak the sails and make differences to these children, no matter how small those differences are. So although some of this is going to sound quite depressing and negative, I want you to hold on to this pedagogy of hope, because with hope, just like Bandura says here, hope does not necessarily ensure success, but a lack of hope assuredly spawns failure. So that's my interpretation of Bandura there. I'm setting the scene as to what we're trying to do here. If you wanted to scan this QR code, it takes you to an article from last week, which explores how we believe that it's our own self-determination that leads us to the positions that we occupy in society, and our success as a result of our hard work, and other people's lack of success, if you like, as a result of their lack of hard work or laziness. You can have a look at that into your own time, but it's a very accessible article from The Conversation that kind of gets to the nub of what we're talking about here, and the fact that life chances is still an ongoing debate that we're having. I want to just dispel some quick myths here. The idea that life is meritocratic, basically that we're all on an equal playing field, and the results that we get out of the race that we run in, the rat race, as a result of fairness, that all the conditions are fair. We all know intuitively that life is unfair, and sometimes the deck is stacked against some of us. Obviously, I'll share the presentation with you later, so I'm not going to read slides to you. Not only is life not fair, Michael Sandel claims that actually it's devised to be unfair, but presented as fair for ideological reasons, ways of governments to control populations and not spend in services that require them, things like welfare, SEND, social care, and things like that, in order to level the playing field. So I'm dealing with here, trying to dispel the myth that life is fair, it's a meritocracy, and indeed that the schools in which we work in are fair. We know that they're not fair. Also, to explode the myth of this just world hypothesis, Lerner's idea that we have a cognitive bias to believe that the world is actually a fair place, and it's governed by a sense of overarching godlike morality, that actually what you get out of life is a result of what you put into life. And think about all the things that we might say in a classroom that kind of hark back to this fundamental of we believe that the world is a just place. Well, if you see, if you go around a children's hospital, for example, you know that the world is not necessarily a just place. This term of life chances, I was introduced to it by Max Weber, or as we used to say when I was studying, Weber. So I have to pull up my students sometimes and call him by the German pronunciation, Max Weber. And Max Weber expands on Marx and says it's not just structural factors that keep us in our place. We have some opportunity to move those sails on the boat that we are sailing through the course of life. We have some chance to pull the sails. We don't have equal access to maneuver the boat in the same way, but we can make these little differences. So Weber coins the term life chances. Before we start, I didn't know who I'd have in the room today. I did a sailing course recently, and that's why maybe everything's catching nautical themes in the things that I'm thinking about recently. Basically, when you're sailing, if the wind is coming at you from the headway, a headwind, your boat stops dead in the water. You don't move forward. If anything, you probably move backwards slightly. So it's very important that you keep the sail out of the sort of the 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock position, because if you do put the sail into the wind in the headway, you will stop dead. Conversely, if you have wind coming at you from the 6 o'clock position, the tail position, that tailwind will really push you along, and the sail acts like a parachute. So what we actually want is tailwinds. We want tailwinds, and we want to avoid headwinds wherever possible. This is a fundamental motif that I'll keep coming back to today. So, kind of inspired by 1970s board games, I've came up with this brand, Headwinds and Tailwinds. Who wants to play a game of Headwinds and Tailwinds? Maybe you've got board games that look like this stuffed in your loft, your attic, or in a dusty cupboard somewhere where you try and get your kids to play them. But obviously, iPads are much more distracting than getting out one of these dodgy board games where half the pieces are missing. But that kind of sensibility was what I was inspired by when I was trying to come up with this game. Why was I coming up with a game rather than a boring presentation like the one I'm giving you today? Well, let's explore that in a bit more detail. What I wanted to do is to have participants. As I said, originally this was written for people who were thinking about coming to university, mature students, people who hadn't grown up in households where the daily script was, how are you doing in your A-levels? Which university are you going to go to? Which course are you going to study? These people are often, in their 30s or 40s, and university was never in their life script, or it was paused. Also, this makes it a very inclusive board game because it doesn't assume prior knowledge on behalf of the participants. I also wanted to move away from, especially at Leeds, the tendency for us to use textual learning all the time, and kind of broaden this out into maybe Bloom's more kinesthetic mode of learning. So I thought that we could have a quite a physical board game where we have a massive board game played out in the classroom. So we'll have participants, actually live people, moving as if they were the counter on the board. And instead of just having normal dice, we'll have great big, huge inflatable dices or die, and we'll roll those in the classroom, and we can have a bit of fun. And, we've got movement involved rather than people having to just sit down. So I wanted a kinesthetic game aimed at practitioners working in school-based settings, perhaps with SEND remits, or people supporting children and families in community settings like youth clubs, for example, or after-school clubs, or whatever you might think. The core design embeds life chances theory, and it's also influenced by Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory model in the game mechanics. The participants experience viscerally what unfairness feels like by participating without being told what unfairness is. We reveal how life works unfairly towards the end of the board game, but it's important that participants experience the embodied sensation of how unfairness plays out. And that makes it experiential in nature. So, further ado, how does the game work? Originally, as I say, this is due to take place in person. I'm starting getting inspired by how AI can work as a co-pilot with you to code things and produce games. So I'm thinking not in the not too distant future, this might be an interactive electronic game in a way that you could do in a much more interactive way through a medium like this, like on a Teams call or through a MOOC or something like that. And I don't think that that possibility is very far away, in the same way that those kind of possibilities of turning an analog game into a digital game required a lot more people and a lot more lead-in time. As I said, I've got this far in sort of 2 hours, and I'm not saying that to brag, I'm saying that to hopefully inspire you to think maybe I could do some of this kind of thing with some of my ideas. So basically, I'll give you a visual demonstration how the great game works. So here's the mechanics of gameplay. Let's imagine that we're in a classroom and we tape a line across the floor, across the middle of the classroom floor, and everyone begins on that center line. When it's your turn as a participant, you roll one of these oversized dramatic inflatable dice. If you roll a odd number, you pick from the Headwind deck. And if you remember what I said, we don't want headwinds because headwinds are blowing in our face and they're stopping us from moving forward. So if you roll an odd number, you pick from the orange deck. If you roll an even number, you pick from a tailwind deck. The wind that's coming from behind us and billowing out our sail like a parachute, and that will move us forward. The card, very much like a Monopoly community chest type card, you have the opportunity to read out to the rest of the group what it says on your card. But for inclusive reasons, the facilitator might read what's said on the cards. So having read what's on the card, you take the steps forward or backwards, depending on what's written on those cards, and then you hold your position until the next round. What do you need in order to do this? You need the Headwinds cards, and I'll show you what they look like. You need the Tailwinds cards in blue. You need one really large, dramatic, fluffy or inflatable dice. There's a participant information sheet that I've put together, which I'll share with you after the presentation. And because this is ultimately a learning exercise, flip chart or whiteboard, or an opportunity to debrief and unpick some of the experience of the participants of what they made and what their reflections were. So here's the starting point of the game, the assumption of the meritocracy. And we can't see this very well, but we've got two participants here stood on the center line. We've got Alex and Sam. Let's see if I can see that a little bit more clearly, which I can't. I wonder if I can. Nothing ever goes to plan, does it? Can I big that up? Right.
What are you trying to do, Nathan?
What's happening? I'm simulating that Sam has picked a card, which I cannot now read on the screen, which is an orange card, which is, because he's taken 2 steps back, it's obviously a life event which has happened outside of the school. I'm just trying to see if I can see the presentation not in presenter mode. All right, I might be able to see this. So Sam has rolled the dice and he's rolled, or she's rolled, an odd number. And so she's picked from the Headwind deck. And the Headwind deck says your family lived in temporary accommodation for 8 months. And on account of that, you need to move back 2 steps. Alex, on the other hand, has drawn the more favourable Tailwind card. And Alex has taken 2 steps forward because he or she, her parents owned their own home and you had a bedroom of her own or his own, which has nothing to do with school. On the next round, Sam pulls another Headwind card, that the youth club closes down due to council cuts. So there's nowhere to go. So you move back 2 steps. Alex on that round pulls, yes, Chrissy?
Just wanted to ask you, because you're talking about these cards, what happens then? The students move backwards in the physical location from that line that you says. What happens then? Are they articulate? Is there any conversation? What happens then? Or does this then end there, the engagement with the card?
No, this is a good point. I think I do come on to this in the slide deck. In the instructions that I've written for the game, I've suggested that maybe after 2 or 3 rounds of this, as the participants start experiencing it, you stop and pause and ask students to remark on their own position, how they're feeling about things, where they see themselves relative to other people and things like that. And then there's another opportunity to start doing that a little bit deeper after maybe around round 7 or 8. And then, as I say, after about 10 rounds or so, you finish the game. Everyone's in relatively different positions within the room, which we ask people to then sort of think about that and think about how people ended up in those positions, and then do the debrief with the flip chart or whatever in order to unpick that. So I'm saying initially that maybe for the first 2 or 3 rounds, you just let the participants experience the game sort of as is with very little explanation. So they're experiencing it primarily from a sense of unfairness, perhaps. So
because I think there's an opportunity for problem solving as well, potentially, and exploring possibilities for improving that situation, so that we don't feel that the students, well, who play, isn't it, don't feel that there is no hope, or there isn't anything that I can, as an individual or, you know, with others, can do about it, potentially. And I could see the potentially of moving students then towards a more positive outcome, depending on the solution or the idea that they have to advance from that position they are in because of the card they got.
I would agree with that in principle. I think that there's ultimately what we are trying to do, as I say, is tweak the sails on behalf of the experiences of these children. Let's call them children so we don't keep sort of swapping terms. So these children, Sam and Alex, this is hypothetical. Their situation is sort of hypothetical, of course, in the classroom. You know, they're becoming into these positions as a result of the rolling of the dice. I am keen, you know, I've done elements of research into what we might call the dominant resiliency narrative that comes through in policy, such as mental health policy, whereby to what extent do we individualize these structural problems that Sam and Alex are experiencing, and as a result of individualizing them, I'm just giving you the other side of the coin here, and then I'll flip the coin. Do we individualize students or children to say, your circumstances, there is some control, or there is some hope within your circumstances? Because there is some danger in that children are given a sense of responsibility over their circumstances, which they ultimately cannot do anything about, and they do experience failure. And from a sort of a behavioral psychology point of view, the sense of failure then is attached to that sense of responsibility that was given to them through these sort of resiliency dialogues. Having said that, I want to return to this idea of hope, that somewhere within this, there may be an opportunity to redo the game again, where self-efficacy and things like that becomes another narrative that runs alongside that. So I'm definitely into students not feeling or leaving the experiences feeling powerless, but do bear in mind that Sam and Alex, their positions and the cards that they're experiencing are hypothetical. They don't relate to their actual lives. The parties, you know, if I was Sam and you were Alex, we know that you know, your parents didn't attend a university or whatever, you know, it's not true to us. And so we can separate from the hypothetical, which provides some safety in this, I think, which enables us to grapple with this sort of quite pernicious, problematized concept of differences in life chances in a safe way. Because what I'm arguing is that we first need to grapple with this pernicious and unsettling and difficult concept in order for us to, as practitioners, to engage with it constructively, to make a difference with it. I think if we don't acknowledge it and name it and embody these experiences empathetically, because again, it's not Sam's real experience and it's not Alex's real experience, there's a tendency to be overly optimistic, which can be damaging as well, I'm thinking. Sorry, I'm thinking aloud there. I'm just, you know, I'm so, as you can see, it's a work in progress, and I'm trying to think around what I'm hoping that the game achieves in a sort of a clear sense, and then how it might be adapted in Chris's suggestion to also give a sense of hope with children of what could we do, and maybe that could be a subsequent more detailed part of the debrief. Maybe the debrief could be structured where we could look at each snapshot and say, well, how could we look at this differently, or what sort of support would so and so need in order to overcome this, in order to make it a more positive narrative. So I won't read through these, but because I'll show you some illustrative cards. So basically what's happening, that whenever a participant rolls an odd number, they need to pick from the orange deck, which is a tailwind, which is a negative, and whenever they roll a positive number on the dice, they pick from the tailwind deck, which propels them forward. These are some examples of the kind of circumstances that are detailed in the headwinds and tailwind cards. I'll share these with you as well, so you can look at them in sort of more detail. The key thing to acknowledge is that if something is external to the school experience, if it's external, i.e. it's something that doesn't happen in school, if it's a positive thing, a tailwind, the child moves forward 2 paces. And if it's something negative that happens outside of school, the child moves back 2 paces. However, there are on these cards some interventions that relate to in-school activities. For example, a supportive, positive conversation with a member of staff. That would be seen as a tailwind propelling forward, and as it happened in school, it only has the effect of moving the child on 1 pace. Why I'm trying to get this across is the idea that negative out of school experiences and positive out of school experiences can have quite a dramatic effect on children's success. So as we know from the research, things like mother's level of education, whether or not there are books in the household, what the kinds of conversations about education are taking place in the household or not, have a deterministic effect on children's engagement and attainment in school. And that quite can often feel as staff supporting children that come from environments where there are no books in the household, or according to sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, much more pressing needs like the need for stable accommodation, the need for food, the need for warmth and security and things like that, trump, for the want of better word, take precedence over children's need for development and esteem as realised in school. This is why it relates to the conceptual framework of Bronfenbrenner, where Bronfenbrenner will say that all these other factors within the children environment is shaping the child's development. And I'm trying to get across the point that the school is just one of those spheres that can impact upon children's development. And I think we have to acknowledge this as per the research and the evidence base, rather than think that, school can be the magic bullet. But the school can be a better magic bullet than it is if the staff within the school understand the impact of these external factors and inequality around life chances, I would argue. So here's the big reveal towards the end of the game. The decks are deliberately weighted. 70% of the cards in the decks relate to extra school factors, things that the school has no control over, such as housing, income, family services policy, the life chances stuff that our friend Weber or Weber talks about. While there's 30% of the cards describe in-school factors such as labelling, behaviour policy, teacher expectations and SEND identification. Therefore, this proportionality encodes the research findings that out-of-school factors explain more variance in outcome than in-school factors. And participants discover this through the counting exercise in the debrief, i.e. that there are 2/3 more out-of-school factors in the deck than the in-school factors that can act as protective factors, if you like. So that's the game in a nutshell, and I'd be happy to take some feedback along the lines of kind of what Chrissy has provided. We can do that in the chat, or we can stop and pause, and I can get a drink of water, or I can briefly in the next sort of 5 minutes talk you through the methodology that I used. And actually, this mad scientist character is based on my is based on an avatar created from my university profile pic. So allegedly, that's what I look like, some kind of mad scientist creating this. I thought you'd be flagging at this point in the presentation, so I thought I'd put a cartoon in there to cheer you up. So here I am with my methodology, and this is something that I'm basically saying. I came up with this game. I came up with the resources which I'll share in sort of 2 hours, and if you could use a similar sort of approach to realize some of the more creative ideas that you might have. Chrissy.
Nathan, this has been fascinating. I think this is a good moment to pause, get yourself something to drink, read the chat, because there is a lot in there. I think that would be exciting for you. Many suggestions, many opportunities. I think we all see the mechanics of the game from very different angles that will not only enrich potentially, what you're putting together, but at the same time, I personally feel that it creates opportunities to use the concept of the game in a wider range of settings. So I'm not going to propose anything. I would like you to get that glass of water, like you said, and engage first of all here in the chat, but also invite colleagues who would like to have a conversation with you directly about some aspects of the game. Is that okay with everybody?
Okay, absolutely fine. I'll just grab a drink of water if you want to have 2 minutes reflecting on that, and I'll come back to you in a sec. Okay, great.
Thank you. Isn't this fascinating? So useful. So useful. Let's read what colleagues are saying here in the chat. Is there anything? Let's read first. Let's have a little bit of time to recap, or add if you would like to add something here as well. And then when Nathan is back, we can have that conversation. But my head was sort of in flames. I have to say, because I could see potential how we could use it. Anna?
Yeah, agreed. Do you remember, Chrissy, Kath Botham and Teresa Nicholson developed a game called Diversity Dash at MMU? And that was similar but different because it was discussion based, and it was it was based on higher education, wasn't it? And kind of the different. So for the rest of the group, this is a game that Kath and Teresa presented at the Advanced HE conference years and years and years ago. And so students worked in groups, and they would have, or participants worked in groups because they delivered it for staff as well, and I delivered it for staff at UCLan. You would be given a character who was a student in HE who had certain diversity characteristics, and then there'd be a big grid on the floor, so it was, you know, like you were suggesting, Nathan, very physical, very up and moving, and then the sort of the host of the game would present different scenarios. So for example, everyone in your class is going out for drinks after the workshop, and then the participants would have to decide in their group how that would impact on their character based on the different diversity characteristics that they had. So if they were Muslim, for example, they may not be comfortable going out for drinks. If they had caring responsibilities or a part-time job, they wouldn't be able to go. And then you either move forwards or backwards on the grid based on the impact that it has on you. And it just reminded me of that. But the thing that's very, very different, because it is discursive, and it is more about, I think some of the people in the chat, there was some discussion about making it more discursive, but I really like this because I like that as well. But the thing that I like about this that's different is that element of just unfairness, and the fact that, you know, we're not going to discuss it, because in the real world you wouldn't get to discuss the impact. It would happen to you, wouldn't it? And I think this is something that my colleagues would really benefit from as an academic development exercise, because what we deal with at the University of Law is professional learning and professional courses, and even the kind of the undergraduate, like the LLB and the undergraduate business courses, they're taught with a very kind of professional learning slant to them, and a lot of our colleagues are brought in from the professions to deliver those courses. And there's I think a lot of my colleagues struggle with this idea of meritocracy, because if they've made it as solicitors or barristers, then that's down to them and their hard work. And so if the students are struggling, it's just because, you know, they're not as committed, not as motivated, that sort of thing. I'm generalizing very broadly, but I do feel that we struggle as a university, and probably as a sector, to be fair, with this notion of meritocracy, and I think this kind of torpedoes it very nicely. And I would like to kind of throw this into the mix in my own context and say, well, how are you going to push back against this, because this is what it's like. So thank you, Nathan. I'm waffling really while Nathan gets some water, but yeah.
I do share your view. Something similar happens in social work training, that the professionalization of us seems to become, I don't know if it's a European thing or whatever it is, very dour, very, very serious. And part of the social work training that I used to deliver within local authority was to get social workers to be more playful, because you can get this sort of sense that playfulness is flippant, or even in the case of these sort of games that you're describing at UCLan and this one, almost that it lacks severity because it's movement based and embodied, rather than textual and serious and clipboard and professional looking. So, you know, there's something in that, in to be able to push people out of their sort of default operating mode of what they consider to be a valid form of knowledge, of kind of what counts. And I just kind of liked both of these ideas, your idea and the safely bodily experience of it, in the same way that we experience play as children. We don't read about play, and we don't read about creativity. Well, we do, I guess. We don't read about creativity and imagination. We engage in it. We sort of immerse ourselves in the experience. This is a sort of quotation that I'm saying in the methodology picture here. It's an immersion thing, is creativity and imagination and playfulness, rather than, yeah. So it does chime in with me what you were saying there. I'm just reading through some of the comments here, because could we call it serious play or playful seriousness, Vasiliki, when you're saying other opportunities for reflection and on what inequalities exist in reality? Yes, because this isn't just a game of unfairness and, hey, yes, what does it feel like to feel unfair or wrong done or done wrong by? We have to scaffold some meaningful learning on there. So I think that we do have to build in opportunities to reflect on broadening out into discussions. Well, you know, I'm going off memory, but this young person, Sam, had their own bedroom. Who remembers doing their homework from their own bedroom, or did you have to do it on the kitchen table, or what sort of impact did that have on you as you were trying to learn going through maybe your academic career and things like that? So I think, yeah, I agree with that we need to, it has to be discussion based, and that's what I think others have said in the chat as well.
Nathan, there is also an observation from Karen. I think Karen has left, but did you see that? Maybe you don't set what is a headwind or tailwind. Maybe it's just a scenario discussion point. This is the suggestion from Karen. What has happened? What may be the outcome? What might be the intervention? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't want, I guess how I'm feeling about it is that the debrief sort of place is the place to start solving some of this and deeply reflecting on it. I think that the participants have to not solve as they go along. I think they have to end up with the very visual and visceral scenario at the end of the game of the sort of the unfairness, because I think that emotive component of learning, that emotionality of experiencing the vicarious unfairness at the end of the game is kind of key to cementing the experience as meaningful and different to perhaps other learning experiences. That there's a novelty sort of factor to it, there's a visceral, there's a emotional component of, and there's a very visual sort of sense, because the children will be scattered throughout the classroom. And I think that it's important that we get to that before we start solving it. And I think that we can start solving it then. And I think we should start solving it, and we should start be looking at solutions, not just saying, hey, it's all crap. As I say, it should go back to the first slide sort of thing, that there should be a pedagogy of hope that we can make some small differences. So let's open up that conversation. What small differences could we make at these different snapshot points that you experienced in the game? But I think that sort of reflection on action, I'd prefer that. I'm a bit defensive. I don't know. I've been defensive in this. I don't know. I think it's got more meaningfulness if the intellectualization of it takes place at the end, and the participants are left with a prolonged period of the visceral period of the unfairness, because kind of that's what it's like in reality for children who are experiencing this. And if we imagine, I don't know, from a Freudian point of view, that the more unfair that the game gets, a bit like Monopoly in its original intention, there's that sort of sense of tension and a pressure cooker type thing, whereby that cements, that emotionality cements the learning experience. You can see how I'm calling on Bloom and things like that in this to kind of make sense that learning is not just a sort of intellectual.
Nathan, we have a suggestion here from Mark, and I'll let him explain it because he is with us.
Okay.
But my comment on the cards again was, and while you were thinking, talking, and I was thinking, and everybody else was also writing here, I was thinking, do you need the separation of headwind and tailwind cards, or could that be one set, and then the students, for example, decide what that is? You know, does it take them forward? Does it take them backwards? Because if we want them to critically engage and understand specific situations, would it be useful for them to decide what that card means, what that situation means for them and how that feels? Or do we impose, maybe when we say, you know, this is a good thing or this is a bad thing, on our students, how we see situations?
I think that's a really good point. I really do think that's a really good point. I've got sort of two ways of looking at it, at least. That one is that the nature of a lot of these life chances things are imposed upon us. So it's kind of things that are outside of the individual control. So there is some value in the game as is, where it is sort of individualized. But of course, people interpret the same things in different ways, and it might be interesting to incorporate that into. So, for example, it could be a question of, well, okay, that's the card that you've drawn. Would you say that that moves you forward one step or backward one step, or does it actually, you know, in your interpretation, move you backward 4 steps? Or does something like that just keep you stood still where you are, or something like that? So again, that would be an opportunity to incorporate dialogue into the game, wouldn't it, where it's based on the individual's interpretation. So yeah, there's kind of two ways there, aren't they, of do we stick with the idea that these life chances ideas are like imposed on us, or do we think there is some element of interpretation in all this, which of course there is, because you can get two people experiencing the same thing and interpret it, you know, as a setback or a challenge, for example.
Yes, thank you. Let's see what Mark had in mind. Mark?
Well, hi then, Nathan. That was incredibly fascinating and amazing that you came up with the concept so quickly. I think it really demonstrates the world of unfairness really, really beautifully. But for me, I would like it to come out of that world of doom and gloom. And I was kind of thinking to myself that there are actually ways to get out of unfairness, not completely, but there are things you can do in your life that can kind of help you along your path. So I was thinking, could you not have like a card deck or something, which you can either put at the side of the room and the student can go and get one of the cards from the deck, or you could maybe hand it out where people can pick from, which enables them to kind of get out of their situation. So such as like a card that would say borrow equipment, or join a study group, or find a mentor, something like that, that really puts the kind of more positive spin on the game.
I agree. I agree. My brain's turning like mad now, thinking about how we might build that into the sort of the method. What I'm thinking of. It's Mark, is it? Yeah.
Yes.
You know, like in the Millionaire sort of game, where people get the sort of the lifelines and the
exactly, that would be brilliant.
So there's something in it where the student, well, the child participant, whatever, can make a choice to.
Yes.
So there's a sense of agency in there and things as well, and yeah, I kind of like that. I've not figured out how to do it yet, but yeah, it could add another sort of complexity and engagement factor into the game, as well as it being sort of a learning sort of tool that the people who say like, hey, we don't just have to let these things happen for us, we can be proactive as well, because that's an important message as well in all this, isn't it? Yeah, I think you're right. I'll give that some thought, definitely.
Great, Nathan, good luck with it. It's fascinating.
All right, thank you. Thanks for your feedback and help there.
This is great. We just have a few more minutes. We have Sam also with us here. I don't know if Sam, because Sam has created card sets, if he would like to add any thoughts, observation here with Nathan.
No, I don't think I have anything particularly to contribute. I think it's a really interesting concept. I guess for me, the only thing that I was thinking of as you were describing it was whether you might generate really rich conversations by not actually clearly stating how much of an advantage or disadvantage a particular factor is. So you for example have given -2 points for one card and +2. If you actually got the group to try and work out or discuss how much of a disadvantage, obviously you get very different perspectives, but that's actually what you're trying to point out, whereas perhaps having a fixed number implies that everyone has the same experience, which is perhaps not always true, but also it allows those groups to have those disagreements about perhaps, oh no, actually I don't think that's much of a disadvantage, and somebody else goes, oh no, actually I really do think that is quite a significant disadvantage. I wonder if you'd thought about that aspect of objectivity in the numbering.
I think both of those last comments, especially, have given me food for thought on where to take the development of this. I do think that I agree with you that I agree with most of the comment that has been around how do we facilitate discussion with this game. The purpose of the game is not the game in itself, but it's to facilitate dialogue, discussion, sharing of perspectives about things. So I think that's a really thoughtful suggestion, really, of that how can, rather than giving it a ascribed value of -2, open it up more as to, well, what does this mean? And good point. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Nathan. I mean, from the conversation, you can see, Nathan, that there is a lot of interest in the concept that you are developing, and it is under development. But there's a lot of value, and I personally can see the value that it had for you having that conversation at this stage, and getting ideas perhaps that will help you, to further develop it, and perhaps with more clarity and more diversity, but also to simplify the game. Because if you get rid of sort of the headwind and tailwind and that numbering from the outset that is predefined, you don't need a dice even, and when we think about the curriculum, we often overcomplicate things, also when we create resources. So maybe simplifying the concept will make it more diverse and more applicable to what you want to do, more richer, in the conversation and the debates you will have, but also creates opportunities for others to take that concept and use it in very, very different settings. So I think we'll leave it here for now. We are excited to hear how you got here, but we'll leave it for some other time, and perhaps you could write that up as a little article that we can share with everybody. But I think hearing you talking about the game itself was really, really valuable for all of us. And I think there is an opportunity here. I don't want you to commit to anything now, but maybe think about it, how Creative HE and the Imaginative Curriculum Research and Scholarship Center can support you to develop a blueprint. You will be fully acknowledged. And we have the support also from Kirsten here in the library, how we could create perhaps an openly licensed blueprint that could travel within the university, across the sector, maybe to other planets as well. Who knows? Let's be ambitious. Yeah. So that's something to think about. But we are grateful for sharing your very first prototype with us, and are looking forward to seeing how it grows, how it evolves, and what we can do to support you in your efforts. Thank you so much, Nathan, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Could I briefly say what a refreshing opportunity this has been to, from an academic, in academia, to put an idea that is not fully complete, that has still got holes in it, and to receive, constructive and well-meaning feedback in that process. It's really, really refreshing to experience a group and work with my ideas, and for me to work with your ideas in that way. So, thanks for the opportunity to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. This is what open education is all about. This is all about sharing. It's about collaborating with others and making a difference. I'll hand over to Sam, who would like to say something.
No, I pushed the wrong button. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for making the time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Until the next time, 18th of February. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.